So, if you've ever planned on building a new deck or doing a big renovation here in Canada, you've probably hit a brick wall. And I don't mean a literal one. I'm talking about a wall of confusing regulations. We're going to focus on railings today. You know, a simple safety feature that has somehow become incredibly complicated. All right, let's dive in and see if we can clear this all up.
You picture it, right? That beautiful, modern, horizontal table railing for your new deck. It looks amazing in all the magazines. But here's the million-dollar question. Could that dream design of yours actually be illegal?
And the answer, which is just so frustrating, is, well, it depends. Because in Canada, whether your railing is legal or not doesn't come down to one single national rule. Nope, it all depends on where you live. What's totally fine in Vancouver could get your project shut down in Toronto.
So why is it such a mess? Why is it so fragmented? Well, it all comes down to how building codes are actually set up in this country. Let's break down that hierarchy.
Okay, so think of the National Building Code, the NBC, as a suggestion box. It's a model code, a template, but it doesn't have any real legal power on its own. Each province then takes that template, adopts it, and almost always makes its own tweaks and changes. And that final provincial version, that's what your local building inspector is actually working with.
Now, it's not complete chaos, I promise. There are a few core safety rules that are pretty much the same everywhere you go. These are the things you can basically count on no matter which province you're building in. First things first, the magic number for height, 1070 millimeters. That's roughly 42 inches. For just about any exterior deck or balcony, your guardrail needs to be at least this tall. If you stick to this height, you are meeting the standard for every single jurisdiction in Canada. It's your safest bet for sure.
Next up is the famous 4-inch sphere rule. Basically, any gap in your railing, whether it's between pickets, cables, whatever, it has to be small enough that a 100-millimeter sphere can't get through. This is a huge child safety rule, and it's thankfully consistent everywhere.
All right, so we've got height and we've got opening size. Seems pretty simple, right? Well, hold on, because here's where it all gets messy. Let's get into the single biggest point of confusion, the great climbability debate. All this confusion really boils down to a major change between two different versions of the National Building Code. The 2015 code had this really vague rule saying guards must be designed to not facilitate climbing. And, a lot of inspectors took that to mean a total ban on horizontal railings that kind of look like a ladder. But then the newer 2020 code came along and just removed that rule from most homes, specifically for any fall that's less than 4.2 meters. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. Because every province adopts these national codes on its own timeline, we've ended up with this patchwork of old rules and new rules all existing at the same time. This one little change is the real reason there's so much confusion out there. To really see how this plays out in the real world, let's just compare two big provinces with two very different ways of doing things, Ontario and British Columbia. This table really just lays it all out. You've got Ontario still working with the older, more restrictive 2015 code. So that whole non-climbable thing is still a big deal, and it really limits horizontal railings. But then you look at British Columbia. They've adopted the new 2020 code, so those exact same railings are generally allowed. It's wild, right? Two provinces, same design, two totally different outcomes.
So what does non-climbable actually mean when the inspector shows up? Well, in provinces that still use this rule, it means you can't have any horizontal pieces that a kid could use as a foothold, specifically not in that zone between about your ankle and your waist. And this is exactly why most of those popular horizontal cable and rod designs are basically a no-go in those places.
So, with all this back and forth, you're probably thinking, is there any design that just works everywhere, no headaches? And the answer is yes. Let's talk about the universal safe bet, the design that will keep you compliant no matter your postal code. Here it is, your simple, go-to checklist for a compliant railing anywhere in Canada. Stick to that 42-inch minimum height. Make sure you follow the 4-inch sphere rule for all your gaps. And for the main part of the railing, the infill, go with vertical pickets, glass panels, or solid panels. These designs have zero horizontal elements, so they completely sidestep that whole climbability issue everywhere. But listen, this is probably the single most important thing I'm going to say. The rules we've gone over are an amazing guide, but the final say that always comes from your local building authority. So please, before you buy a single piece of material, before you build anything, get your plans in front of them and get them approved first.
This whole situation leaves us with a really interesting question. The code is trying to change to keep up with modern designs, right? Like with those horizontal railings.
But when provinces adopt these changes so slowly, it just creates years and years of confusion. So, as our taste in design keeps changing, how do we make sure our safety codes can keep up without leaving homeowners and builders totally stuck in the middle?